Today in our colonial kitchen, we're going to be making a dish called bread pudding. Now, when I first heard the word bread pudding, I said, ew, it does not sound appetizing to me. But I promise you, if you like French toast and if you like flavors like cinnamon, nutmeg, maple syrup, you're gonna really like this dish. After I tried it, I really liked it. Bread pudding dates back to the 11th or 12th century, and it was commonly known as poor man's pudding, and it was popular with the lower class. In order to use up leftover bread, they would make this dish so as nothing would go to waste. So I'll post this recipe on the website after we're finished, so if you don't get all the ingredients now, it's okay. The first thing we're going to use is butter that we made the other day. The other ingredients are sugar, milk, 2 eggs, cinnamon, salt, and nutmeg. I've added a little vanilla because I love the flavor of vanilla. And also overnight I have soaked some currants, which are baby raisins, and I've soaked them overnight in rum. Now, just so you know, anytime we use rum in a recipe, we use rum in the Joe Froggers and we're using it in our bread pudding. Once the rum is baked into the baked good, it loses all its alcohol. So all you have is some delicious flavoring left. So don't worry about the rum being in the recipes. I'm also using bread. Now, this is the kind of bread I just happen to have left over in the house, but you can use any kind of bread. You could use white bread, you could use wheat bread, you could use home-baked bread, you can use rolls like this. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting them up into cubes. So even if the bread has been old and hard and stale, you can still chop it up and use it in your bread pudding. The egg and milk mixture will soften it right up, and it's going to bake to be a nice, almost like a casserole, French toast casserole. So it's really a tasty dish. I like a nice crunch on top of my bread pudding, so in this jar I have some cinnamon and sugar mixed together. I'm going to put that on top, so when it bakes it'll be a nice crunchy top. And you can top it with whipped cream, or you could use maple syrup. They used to make savory bread puddings, which would not have had, my oven's ready, would not have had sugar in it or spices. They would have had maybe herbs or pieces of meat, so it would have been a whole different type of bread pudding. I've never tried that, but maybe another day. So I've got my milk, my butter, and my vanilla heating on the stove, and I'm going to heat it up until the milk is warm and the butter is melted. In the meantime, I'm going to, in a large bowl, turn this so you can see, I'm going to put 2 eggs. These were delivered to me from the farm. If I was a colonial lady, I would probably just go outside my door and the chickens would have the eggs ready for me in the morning. And I'm gonna use a whisk, but colonial people would have probably had one made out of pieces of stick or a type of reed tied together in a bundle. I don't have one of those. I'm going to use a whisk. And we're going to mix our eggs up till they're nice and bright yellow. And to that mixture, we're going to add our sugar and our spices. Pour those in, mix them up. Looks delicious already. So when you're cooking with warm or hot milk and eggs, you have to be very careful when you're mixing them together. What we need to do is temper the eggs so that they don't turn into scrambled eggs. We don't want scrambled eggs in French toast. We want bread pudding. So I'm going to take a very little amount and just slowly stir that in so that the eggs and the milk become the same temperature without cooking our eggs. And once I've done that, I can slowly add in the rest of the milk and butter and vanilla, all those good things. It looks really, it almost looks like soup. My pans are really dirty, sorry. I used to shine them up all the time because they're made out of copper, but been doing too much cooking lately. So I'm stirring it up. You can see it's nice and light brown. So at this point, we're going to add in our raisins. And after I'm going to chop up the rest of my bread. I have no idea how many people this will serve. It looks like a lot. I may have to share some with my neighbors. All this cooking, got a lot of goodies in the house. Okay, so I'm gonna take my giant breadcrumbs, and I'm going to slowly put them in. And it might be watery at first, but all this bread is gonna soak up all that good flavor. I'm gonna get a wooden spoon. And we're gonna fold it in just gently. You don't want it to smush the bread. You want the bread to look like breadcrumbs, big breadcrumbs. You don't want it all mushy. So just gently flip it around until it looks like it's all soaked up. Oh, it smells so good, delicious. Yum, I can't wait to try this. All right, so it's just about ready. And I have my oven on, so we can look. So we're ready to put it into our cast iron pan. I've added some butter around so it won't stick. And into the pan, I'm going to pour our breadcrumbs. And there we go. So on top, remember I told you I was going to add a little crunch. So I'm going to sprinkle some, it's just cinnamon and sugar mixed together. I just happen to have a shaker. And we're going to sprinkle the top. I like a lot of sugar. There you go. I'm going to pop it in the oven and I'll be back when it's cooked. See what it looks like. So while our bread pudding is cooking in the oven, I've taken out some of the utensils and dishes that I use as a reenactor. When I attend an event, the people who reenact try to create the very best that we can to make it like it was actually happening at that time in the 18th century. So over the years, I've accumulated a few things that I bring with me, so when we have mealtime, I'm ready for the 18th century. We talked about this bowl the other day. It's made from red clay and it's fired up in a kiln, which would have been a really big, heavy oven outside. It had to reach really high temperatures to bake the clay into dishes. And you can see on the bottom, it really has a red tint to it. The rest of the bowl is glazed. This is also another piece that I got at Sturbridge Village that I use to keep my butter in. And again, if you look inside, the inside is glazed and the outside is the color of red clay. They would have made this on a pottery wheel. If you go to Sturbridge Village, you can watch them make the pots there that they sell. The drinking vessel would have been made of pewter. This is a tankard. And in it, more than likely, they would have had a type of ale. Even the children drank ale back in the day with their meal. So that's usually what we have in here, but you can also have water in it. The dishes also were made of pewter. Now, back at the 18th century, pewter was not really safe to eat off of because it had a lot of lead content. So any dishes that you purchase today, as a reenactor are food safe, and it's made of metal pewter. The eating utensils are really interesting. My cork fell off because the fork doesn't look like the forks we use, and the tip of it is very, very sharp, so I make sure I keep a cork on it because, again, I poked myself using my fork. The fork was primarily used to hold the food, not to eat with. Surprisingly, the eating was done with a knife. And if you look, this side of the knife is like our knives. It's very sharp, and this side of the knife is curved and rounded at the edge, so it's very different from ours. So when they would eat dinner, if they had meat, they would cut, they would switch hands, they would push the food onto the knife with the fork, and then they would eat it off the rounded side, or this side, never putting the sharp piece in their mouth. It's challenging, believe me, to do it, and I'm not really mastered the art of it. A lot of times I'll bring a spoon with me, because if we have stew, which is a common meal that is cooked over an open fire at an encampment, I find it really difficult, especially when you're really hungry after a long day, to have to use these to eat. It's challenging. So here's our bread pudding, fresh out of the oven. And this is my first time making it and first time trying it. And I have to say, it's probably one of the most delicious things I've ever tasted in my whole life. It tastes like a giant, sweet, spicy donut type treat. And I can imagine with whipped cream or ice cream, it's going to be even more delicious. I hope you get to try it.